Hello, barely sentient local.
Hi!
Stop laughing, this is serious.
Well, I can't help it, can I, with you and your big old face?
I'm exactly the same size.
It's the pictures that got small.
How are you going to get out?
Pull to open.
Pull to open.
Yes, and what do you do?
I tried to talk. I want you to remember that. And I think that you understand us perfectly.
They are everywhere. We've been so blind.
That is the role you seem determined to play, so it seems that I must play.
Here come the drums!
Hello. How are you? We're pulled to open. It's about Doctor Who. Random Who. Thank you. That's the new Pull to Open theme tune. All rights reserved. I came up with the music myself. Sorry, Ron Granger. Yes, we are Pull to Open. We are Random Doctor Who podcast, going randomly in random order through random Doctor Who. My name is Chris Taylor.
And I'm Pete Paschal, and nothing has gone wrong with our regeneration. Don't worry. Keep your zero cabinet secured. We're fine. Everything's all right.
Everything's fine here. How are you?
I'm good. No meta crisis. None.
Excellent. Yes. All right. So we are on this random adventure, and wow, we are loving it. We're loving it. We're in a good mood, I think, Pete, about where the randomizer's been taking us recently. It has been, or at least in its most recent move, it gave us a good thing, which is good because we weren't too happy with where it took us last week. But why don't you give the good folks at home a recap?
I'm going to say that the randomizer has been pretty good about provoking responses at us lately. So previously on Pull to Open, just a few stories ago, we were at a story of the Pertwee era, which looked really good in some ways, but story-wise, perhaps not as good as the Mutants, arguably better as wallpaper, as someone once said. And I think that when someone had the last name Taylor and the first name Christopher. From the Mutants, we were rocketed forward to the Capaldi era for one of his adventures with one Bill Potts, where she was looking for a new place to live. And that, of course, was Knock Knock. We had our guest Brian Young from the Full of Sith podcast with us to talk about that episode. That was super fun.
Yeah, and Capaldi, of course, the randomizer's favorite doctor, still undefeated in the randomizer's eyes.
Still undefeated, because even though after we did Knock Knock, we did a little interlude in 19th century China in Legend of the Sea Devils, an adventure that was arguably all wet. And to close out the Whittaker era, well, almost. It's the penultimate episode of Jodie's run. The randomizer then fell back on it.
Wallpaper. Yeah, I'll just say
also wallpaper.
Also wallpaper.
But the randomizer fell back on its favorite doctor to take us to. Well, before I tell you where it taken us to, I'll give you a little bit of data on why we know Peter Capaldi is the randomizer's comfort food. We have done 13 out of 34 12th Doctor stories now, which is really about 38% of his run, so almost half. So of all the Doctors, in terms of what we've done for Pull to Open so far, that is the highest proportion, although I'm putting a caveat there. It's actually second to Jodie, but that's only because at the very beginning of Pull to Open, for you very long-time listeners, we were not random, and we were doing the show currently. So you can't really count those first few episodes of Pull to Open where we were doing the current, I think it was series 11. So taking Jodie out of it, sorry, Jodie, no offense, it was just a symptom of the podcast, but that skewed it high. So Capaldi is number one. He beats every other Doctor in terms of the number of stories we've done and the number of times the randomizer has taken us there.
And specifically, the number of times it's taken us to the season that we're about to revisit again, season 8. Of
Episode 9, yes. Flatline.
Got my tiny TARDIS.
As do I.
Costume. It's tiny TARDIS time. Yes, what we really should have done with the previously on is set up the fact that we went to Planet of Giants in recent history. We've also been to Logopolis, which features Tiny TARDIS, and Carnival of Monsters with the mini-scope featured a Tiny TARDIS. We almost have a Tiny TARDIS bingo.
What are we missing?
Well, technically, we're missing the episodes with the Tesselector in the Matt Smith era.
Oh, that's true. That's right.
But
yes,
it's
there are a
not
couple of
really-
those.
I guess we have a unintentionally Tiny TARDIS bingo
Yeah.
with Flatline.
I think that there's the Tiny TARDIS bingo, and then there's messing with the external dimensions bingo, which I would include the name of the Doctor in that. Or is it?
Yes.
No, wait, not name of the Doctor. Is it name of the? No, it is name of the Doctor. Sorry.
Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
All those episodes they all have something of the Doctor in that era, and I get them really confused.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's because basically on Transalore, the TARDIS is like super big in that one.
Because its dimensions are leaking out. Yes.
Are there other episodes where it was super big? I know there's I think they've messed around with it in the books and maybe the Big Finish, but other than that, I don't know if there's other ones where it got large.
Big. The unintentional. Yeah, I'm pretty sure we got unintentionally tiny bingo. So please fill out your unintentionally tiny bingo card if you can still see it, if it hasn't shrunk. Because we've reached it with Flatline. The randomizer. I feel like every week we give the randomizer challenges. We'll give one again at the end of the show when we decide where to go next. I feel like it has sort of granted us one wish each. And Pete, I'm not sure what your wish is, but I feel like I sort of gave it the wish early on when I said I wanted like TARDIS heavy episodes, like because it has just served up so many of the episodes that are not. Oh, look, we have a time and space machine at the end of the story to take us away to the next story. No, these are all stories where the TARDIS is absolutely integral. And the randomizer just loves them. It keeps serving them up. And I got to say, I'm so grateful for that. And especially grateful for this one, because this, when I watched Flatline, it didn't really make that much of an impression.
Like the first time, you mean?
The first time I watched it back in 2014. And now I have way different opinions, but we'll get to that.
We'll definitely get to them. And folks, if you want to cut right to them, you can cut right to our commentary on Flatline. You can go ahead and check the show notes in your podcast app or the notes under the video on YouTube. And we will have very prominently the exact time code where our commentary on Flatline begins. Of course, with TLDW, where we summarize the story in record time. And we will jump instead now. I've really got to figure out a way to not awkwardly go to the feedback loop, because that's what I want to do now. And we've actually got lots to talk about in the feedback loop. Good, interesting things from the fans and other places. And let's begin.
Stick around, because it's going to be interesting. We've got the Humoji Challenge coming up. We've got our one of our regular video game show segments. We have the Humoji Challenge, and we have TLDW. We have results from our poll, from poll to open. So it's a fun segment. And listeners, Peter's about to tell you how you can support the fun that is Pull to Open.
Supporting the fun is so key. We love interacting with all of our listeners, and one of the best ways to do so is by reviewing the very podcast you're listening to, guys. You can leave a review in the podcast app you're using, especially Apple Podcasts. It's a great place to leave one. Reviews, especially 5-star reviews, will help make the show visible to more listeners who are eager for great discussion of Doctor Who. And really, the only better way to show your appreciation for this here podcast is to share it with a friend. So feel free to pause the playback, leave a review, or share it out right this second.
Yes, and I know that this isn't officially the order that we do things in, but I'd love to sidestep the Humoji Challenge for a second. This may be self-serving. But we do have a great comment of the week, which I think sort of shows that this isn't just talk about, our listeners really enjoying this and why they should share it with friends. I've been skipping ahead and looking at our comment of the week on YouTube.
Yeah.
So Pete, you want to tell us about that?
Sure. We had a commenter, first-time commenter, but clearly long-time listener, Charby80 with the handle, says...
C. Harvey? Yes.
C. Harvey. Could be C. Harvey. That's me. finally caught up with you. Listened to 89 of these and seems
89.
to be all of them. I think there are older ones not put on YouTube, ? I listened to these while working and have enjoyed my journey with you both. Started on Mysterious Planet and randomly listened, and what a really good way to make your way through Doctor Who. Lots of good moments, and I think my favorite moment was after Frontier in Space and asking to get away from classic stuff. The randomizer hits you with the mutants, yes.
Yes.
Good times.
Yeah, glad you enjoyed that.
I had to stop working for a minute to rewind and watch your faces take that one in. Well, yeah, I got to do that. Chris had to just take that one on the chin. Anyway, spot on stuff, and I can now listen to your journey in the order the randomizer dictates. I will make a personal request to the randomizer as I work cleaning bus interiors, and as spent the last 2 months or so listening to these, I will ask for a bus-related episode. There are a few I can think of, so here's hoping. Anyway, well done, chaps, and thanks very much. Oh, wow. I just love this comment. Obviously, I mean, it's just great. This is exactly, the kind of impact we're trying to have. And it's like, I think this, he's doing exactly what I do with various podcasts. It's like when you love a podcast and you're just using it and you're putting your mind in the place with the hosts and the people who are taking you along with it as you're doing something, whether it's doing the dishes, in this case, cleaning bus interiors or what have you. Just really, it just sort of makes that time pass much quicker, and I love that he's contributing this challenge, which we'll return to at the end of the show.
Yeah, what are bus-related episodes? There's Planet of the Dead.
Planet of the Dead, of course.
Yeah.
Well, did anything with Graham, arguably?
True.
I mean, we did Rosa.
We've done Rosa, yes. So we're on our way to a bus bingo. But also, I love this comment. Well, first of all, wow, listening to 89 episodes of these, and you're still not sick of our voices. That's incredible. Either you're still not sick of our voices, and also I'm assuming you didn't fall asleep on the job. So we don't have that much of a soporific podcast. That's good to know. But yes, wow. That may be the most unusual thing that we've ever heard of people doing while listening to Pull to Open. If you have used Pull to Open to do a more unusual activity than cleaning the inside of a bus, or multiple buses, I'm assuming, please let us know. And we'll also keep track of these, this weirdness that you're doing.
And quick note on the number, I think the 89 is probably accurate. I actually haven't compiled it, but because we've done various episodes that are more like video essays and we explore a topic rather than a actual story of Doctor Who, that sounds about right, because this one right now is our 102nd episode of Pull to Open, but a number of those have been interludes, shall we say.
Yes, they have. Just extraordinary. Thank you, C. Harvey 80. Just so amazing. We were actually looking at analytics on Pull to Open. We found that the average listener does listen to a very good chunk of the show, or does watch a good chunk of the entire podcast, which will often run up to 2 hours on YouTube. So it feels like we got something here. We got a good thing going with this random adventure. And also, it's kind of nice that you really don't need to listen in order. It's almost fun to kind of listen to Pull to Open out of order. Maybe one day you'll be able to listen to it sort of chronologically as we go through the series. Like, listen to whenever we do An Unearthly Child first, then... and eventually you'll skip to the Sensorites where you're like, wait, what is going on? They sound really unprofessional in this one. Because we ourselves are changing and growing and evolving with the podcast. So, but you do not need to listen in order. You can just sort of guess when a particular episode is from. Just get with the random spirit, man. Just pick out something randomly.
That is a great spirit of just jumping on board, particularly with the episode we're about to talk about. But before we do, it's time to jump to the next part of the feedback loop, which, of course, is the Emoji Challenge.
Oof, okay. I will say, by the way, just not to procrastinate a little bit more on this, not that I dislike the Emoji Challenge, but it's interesting, isn't it, that last week the Emoji Challenge was Dimensions in Time.
Right.
And then the randomizer took us to an episode that was all about the TARDIS and dimensions. So yeah, maybe the randomizer is also listening to the emoji challenge. So
the randomizer's always listening.
always
listening.
Always
it's taking it out. It's taking us where we need to go. But I now, Chris, I'm going to take you where you need to go as I describe a Doctor Who story title in the form of an emoji, and you will guess the title.
Will I? Will I though?
We'll see. I think you got this one. And that's the only hint I'm going to give you. Okay. This comes from Father Time Lord, and it comes through a review he left a little bit ago, and it is 4 emojis. First emoji, the repeat button.
Okay.
So it's like a button with the 2 arrows in a circular pattern.
Mm-hmm.
Next, octopus. Next, trash bin. Next, plunger.
Okay, so it's Daleks. It's the something of the Daleks, the return of the Daleks, but there is no return of the Daleks. There's it's the repeat button. Is it Eve of the Daleks? Because it's a time loop?
Don't think it's Eve of the Daleks.
Oh dear. Resurrection of the Daleks?
Yes.
Hey! Oh, thank goodness.
Resurrection of the Daleks.
Oh dear.
Daleks on repeat.
Oof, that was lucky because I was about to go into the everything of the Daleks, and that is a list that I'm not sure I can fully remember every single of the Daleks. So yeah,
no, you done good. Resurrection of the Daleks. Thank you, Father Time Lord, and thank you everyone else who has submitted an emoji title and will in the future. And if you're unsure of how to do that, hey, just drop us a line. Really, anywhere we're at, we're all over social media. We're at Pull to Open 63 on Twitter, on Instagram, on Facebook, and on Threads. We're also, of course, at youtube.com/Pull to Open. And on TikTok at Pull to Open, all one word. Go ahead, leave us a comment or just bring us up on any of those places, however you can. Go ahead and leave the emoji title. Oh, there's also the reviews, guys. You can also leave one in as a review. Just say it.
Leave it as a review. It's a great place to leave it. It helps the podcast to do so. And you can torture me. See if you can come up with a of the Daleks that I don't remember.
You know what, guys? If you want to DM Chris specifically at Future Boy on Twitter so he can reverse this process, that's a thing you can do too. So maybe I'll be on the other end of it once.
Ask me some probing questions about which Doctor Who stories I may or may not remember. I'll give you a hint. Like McCoy era is not one I'm familiar with. So anything in that realm, you're really going to torture me. Although I am. Like if you have cat emojis in there, I'm probably going to guess Battlefield, right? That was the cat one.
That was not the cat one, dude. Come on,
you see what I mean?
Up.
You see what I mean? Survival. Thank you. Battlefield is the one that we did.
We did that one, yeah.
Yes,
we did that for the pod.
That's why I'm thinking of it. Okay, right. So there's an example, folks.
Well, Chris, even though you're not super familiar with the McCoy era, I think you are familiar with the Spotify era. Why don't you tell our friends who are listening on Spotify what else they can do besides listen?
Well, hey, fellow Spotify listeners, if you are like me and listening to the show first thing on a Saturday morning on Spotify, it's a great Saturday morning activity. But you don't just have to sit there listening passively. You can actually rate the show on the Spotify app. Plus, you can answer the question that's there. Plus, you can vote in the feature that we call Poll to Open. And all you have to do is scroll down on that page there below our video. If you're watching on Wi-Fi, you can see our video like you can on YouTube. But below that, there's a poll where you can rate the episode that we're talking about. And we will discuss those ratings. The polls remain open no matter when in history you happen to be looking at that episode, so you can add your vote. And we have some ratings now for the Capaldi episode Knock Knock, where we decide we learn how many of you thought that this was a really classic, solid Doctor Who episode, aka banger? How many of you thought it was a good episode of Doctor Who, aka a Dalek? A bad episode, but we learned something, Professor Hater, or not good episode at all, and no redeeming features, which is an Ogron. Or if you thought it was pretty wallpaper. No, we don't have that rating officially yet.
We'll see,
will
though.
be a different poll. We'll get to that. But the results are that 71% of you agreed with me, Pete, and Brian Young that Knock Knock, the Capaldi episode from season 10, was a Dalek.
Yeah.
So yay Daleks. Surprisingly, 14% of you thought it was a Viscount banger. One of the best of the best. Just not necessarily one that I would have, category I would have placed Knock Knock in, but evidently a lot of you love David Suchet, you love creaky old houses.
They love college life.
Yes,
there it is.
Self-aware stories. Maybe those 14% of you have just moved recently into a new dorm room, and you're like, God, I could have used the TARDIS for this move, and that's why you're like, God, TARDIS is moving service, Viscount banger.
Yeah, in the words of Rose, gotta be students.
Also, 14% of you thought it was a Professor Hater, which is you didn't like it, but at least you learned something.
I was almost there. I was almost there on that episode. I think I went into the commentary thinking I would give it that, and then all the sort of through the discussion, I was like, yeah, I did actually enjoy those parts, the good chunks of it. So yes,
we like to give
low-key Dalek.
If we can. Low-key Dalek in the form of a former Professor Hater. Professor Hater might be appropriate given the outfit that David Suchet was in that one. It felt a bit like Professor Hater in Time Flight. But so maybe that's what you guys were thinking of. But yeah, please vote on this very episode you're listening to right now. You can vote on what you think Flatline is. Hey, maybe even vote now before we've revealed what our opinion is.
Good plan.
We're gonna give it. And then come back at the end of the podcast and see how it measured up.
Do that.
And then go get a burner Spotify account and vote twice.
Yes. The voting twice, always a thing we want to encourage here.
Early and often. It's what the Doctor would do. He would come back and vote in a different incarnation.
You know, it sounds a little bit like something he would do in various things. They should play on that at some point. The democracy episode of Doctor Who and the undermining of it.
Well, we've had the Beast Below. I don't think the Doctor actually voted in that, but he was offered the opportunity to vote on Starship UK. I wonder if there are any other examples of the Doctor participating in democracy. Anyway,
we're warming up for our randomizer challenge later. Before we do that, though, okay, we could. I want to cut to the Flatline commentary. I want to start, but you know what, guys? There's actually been some Doctor Who news this week, and I need to get some thoughts out on what has happened. So, first of all, there was an interview with Ncuti Gatwa for his upcoming season in. What was it in? Was it in Variety? No. It was in Rolling Stone, I think.
Okay.
Am I right? Rolling Stone UK?
I actually didn't read it, so I don't know. I know he's been in the media a lot. I know that obviously he's in the movie Barbie, which is about to come out. They dropped a new pink TARDIS on the banks of the Thames. I don't know if you saw that, but that was in honor of...
How could I not see that? It was like all over Twitter, photoshopped on everything.
Oh my God, I'm going back to the UK later this year. I really hope the pink TARDIS is still there. So, yes, they may have taken it away already, but my goodness.
I wonder if that's like red kryptonite in the Doctor Who universe. So the pink TARDIS is the TARDIS that's gone through a radiation cloud, and everything just gets super crazy. And
it's the extrovert TARDIS. It's the TARDIS with a perception filter taken off. It's like you can't actually take your eyes off it.
So there's that. But the interview was great. He talked a bit about how he binged Doctor Who, like the new series, once he got the job. And so that was really good to hear. And he's really sort of dived in. What's the word? What's the past part? He dove in, and now he seems fully primed and ready, or has been. So that's really good and reassuring.
Did he mention who his favorite new Who Doctor is, or?
I don't think he did. Interesting. I mean, if he did, I don't know what was in there. But there was a lot of good stuff. He seems like he's coming at it with just a great attitude, which I think we kind of knew, but it was just more sort of reassurance. Every time I know this is all managed, of course, from the BBC and RTD's perspective, but at the same time, it's being managed really well in terms of like getting out a little bit of him and a little bit of that. And there's certainly been a scarcity, I would say, of Ncuti Gatwa speaking publicly. Like once he was announced, there was a little bit, and then there was the stuff with Disney Plus in America, and he gave some interviews. And now there's Barbie and here and there, and I'm sure he's going to do press when he debuts, right? So I'm glad he's not overexposed, because every time we get a little bit of him, it's like, oh yeah, like we sort of we're fans. We fanboy and fangirl all over it. So it's all good.
It's interesting because we do have this situation where some of the doctors are fans of the show, right? Capaldi is one, Tennant is one. And then there are other doctors who didn't necessarily watch a lot of it, like Matt Smith, like Jodie Whittaker. And then they have to make the choice of like, are they going to really dive into the previous doctors' performances, or is that going to influence their acting too much? And like, do they have to find it within themselves first? So it's an interesting choice to binge the entire new series. I am curious about, like, is he now going to dive into the classic show as well? Or is he perhaps just going to listen to Pull to Open, and we can take him randomly through certain episodes of the classic show. So if you are listening, Ncuti, please drop us a line. Don't forget to review the show. And
I would say, if you know Ncuti, share the podcast with a friend.
Share with Ncuti. That's our new segment. Share with Ncuti. Yes, we'd love to have you on, Ncuti. We'd love to get your review of a classic Who episode that you've never seen. Obviously, you're now spoiled on all the new Who. Thanks for that. We can't have you on for a new Who episode because you've already seen it all. No, we'll have you on for one of those anyway. So yeah, it's exciting.
Yeah, great interview. Good stuff. Google it. Check it out if you haven't. And the other thing that I need to talk about, this dropped just a couple days ago when we're recording. It's probably old news now, but the BBC has said the next Doctor Who collection is season 20, so the 20th anniversary, which was Davison's second season.
Right,
and 1983. And in addition to all the extras and commentaries, and they got together Peter Davison, Janet Fielding, Sarah Sutton to do some sort of European tour. Poor Mark Strickson feels like he was a little neglected in this one. They only had so much money, I guess. But one of the things they dropped was also essentially a mini-sode, not really a trailer, but it is essentially like an original work. Then they do this for a lot of the other collections, like a quick mini-sode, usually with a former companion, and doing sort of usually a cute kind of story. So, for example, in previous ones, they had Katie Manning promoting, I think it was season 8, with some Autons who were, had the scary heads and the daffodils and stuff. And usually these are done, almost always, I would say, these are done as kind of wink, wink, nudge, nudge, knowing kind of almost send-ups of the show that clearly are just done as promotional material and done, as a story. They're essentially outside the continuity, which is fine. I think that's great. I love having fun with the show. I love all that. This was something different.
This felt like
I'm not saying they've never done it, because there were bits, I think, with Colin Baker. There was one with Perry that looked like it was sort of part of the continuity. But this one wasn't just sort of arguably part of the continuity. It was serious and dark. So I don't want to spoil it, but essentially they go into how Tegan's history with the Mara, which was a big thing in season 19 and season 20. Not a huge thing, but it was a thing, definitely. Very well remembered, the Mara as a monster, and how it was sort of manipulating Tegan into helping her.
If you can't tell, by the way, Pull to Open listeners, this is Pete's era. This is Pete's Doctor. This is we're in prime Pete position here.
Well, season 20 was where I started with Mawdryn Undead.
Yeah.
So
that's right.
But I was just thrilled with what they did here, and God, like Janet Fielding, like really delivers in it, and there's Sarah Sutton's in it, and I don't. Again, go check it out. Maybe I should spoil it. Like, go check it out now, because I want it. I'm going to spoil it now. Okay, so there's bits of it that are spoiled. So if you haven't checked it, pause the podcast, fast forward about 5 minutes, go or check the time code in the notes as where it is, and you'll skip all this. But So
Yeah,
they
it's
reveal
like
that.
what? It's a 10-minute long video, so it's easy to
Yeah,
insert.
it's good. It's a good length, and they reveal that the Mara never quite went away with Tegan. That it's still in her mind, and it fools her into thinking in a dream that she's being taken back into the TARDIS, and Nissa's there, and they're going to go on an adventure. And once she enters the TARDIS, she's in the dark place in her mind again, and it goes really dark, not just physically dark, but dark. And there are bits where the Mara is trying to tempt her and say things like, tempt her with voices, and one of them is Nissa's voice saying, "Tegan, we're together in another universe. That could be you or whatever." And which had every shipper of those two people, Tegan and Nissa, just go nuts on the internet. And I'll talk about that in a minute. But it was just really, really good. And I love how like this is a good moment because at the end, Tegan wakes up, resists the Mara, and looks in the mirror, and essentially like I love she says the words, "Go back in your box," or words to that effect, which I think is amazing. It's a good triumphant moment for Tegan. I think it's like, I like that it's, she says, "Go back in your box," rather than "get out of my head." Right. Like, in other words, she's not desperate to get rid of this thing, but because she's so strong from her experience with the Doctor now and her adventures, she's not quite okay with it, but she's managing this. Like, she's stronger than the Mara, which is great. It's a great little mini story for Tegan.
What a great way to advertise a box set. And I think, we're probably going to see after this more ideas along these lines of like, you can encourage people to buy the box set by saying, hey, it's got these great commentaries. They're all sitting on couches talking about the classic series. But yeah, what about if you add a little bit of canon as well? That's sort of irresistible. And I knew you were going to be totally into this. It is very interesting to see Tegan again after, of course, having seen her in The Power of the Doctor. She's where she made her triumphant return to the show. And here we have more Tegan content, which is fabulous. Yeah. And it did whet my appetite. I got to say, I've been feeling for a while that we need more Davison. Yeah. And we need to go back to these stories that I saw as a kid once, and I think didn't quite appreciate because they kind of had this kind of more adult feel to them. And I think both Kinda and Snake Dance were among those. And I really want to now see Martin Clunes again, who also shows up in this trailer. Not within the canon, but like in the trailer for the series, right? I mean, his yes, my goodness, I remember his character from before he was really Martin Clunes.
Yeah, no, it was that's the guy who plays Lon, I believe, in Snake Dance, and his very memorable role in that. And again, we'll get there when we get there in the podcast. So the last thing I want to say about it is that there is definitely some undertones, possibly even overtones, to the whole thing about Tegan and Nyssa sort of being more than friends. And I've been on record, certainly in the podcast, like I don't honestly like that idea, because as it was written back in the day, I think they're written as best friends and really not really more than that. In addition to that, I would say that and I don't think this is a backread at all. Looking back at Tegan and how she interacted with various guest cast, it feels like she's hetero. I don't get at all sort of a gay vibe there. Now, that said, nothing's really explicit either way. But I do think this is a bit of a response to a certain sort of fan response to that era. And again, I don't want to tell anyone you saw different, whatever, like, see the show you want to see, have your fun. Everyone should. That's fine. I think this is, again, it's not necessarily canon because it's a promo for a Blu-ray, so it's like, I don't want to overread into this too. But I would also say, even though I'm not thrilled about sort of retconning kind of a lesbian relationship between the two of them, which again, I'm not, if you have to throat clear a lot when you say these things, right? Like, it's like, I'm not against that conceptually at all. Like, I last week we were talking about the Doctor and Yaz, and if you write it that way and you want it, and Bill, one of the best companions, and part of it is her sexuality, and how upfront she is about it. All of that is great. I strongly encourage showing the world as it is, and that sort of representation, to a point, certainly, but you don't need to retcon, in other words, to do that. And I feel like this is, I hope this is the limit of where they go with this, because you could still kind of read it either way with the Tegan Nyssa. Like they kind of walk all the way up to the line on it and don't quite go over. So that said, if this is the price I need to pay to see more great content like this, I'm for it. Like that's the other thing. Like, bring it on. As long as I get to see great content like this with Janet Fielding and the character and really smart, thoughtful stuff. Go ahead. Go ahead and do it if that's the price.
Well, I remember on our commentary on Black Orchid, you were very much in the Nyssa and Adric have a thing camp, which I didn't see. So it's definitely a TARDIS team where there's a lot of ambiguity about their relationship. But I have to say, as a big Mordred Undead fan, I did love that they reference the scene where Nyssa and Tegan suddenly get very old together, and sort of. Juxtaposing that with them being very old together, like as they currently are, was interesting. But I got that shiver down my spine again of like that scene in Mordred Undead where they age super fast. Like that has never really left me. The effect of that moment, my goodness. Yes, that's awesome. Go check it out. And I'm looking forward, Pete, to getting more Nyssa and Tegan adventures in the canon Pull to Open history. We'll get to them all eventually, but like I feel like we are low-key asking the randomizer early to take us to that era again.
Well, I think, and I really hope this gets. We got to get to talking about Flatline in a minute, but I really like. I hope this gets the BBC to do more with Tegan, even because yes, she was back in Power of the Doctor, and she did fine. I think she's even better in this clip, and it's like. Just even though Janet Fielding is sort of barely acted in between, I mean, she hasn't lost it and has not ever sort of stopped understanding that character. So let's just keep it going.
Tegan. Braveheart Tegan could in fact be the name of a RTD spin-off. And bring her into the spin-offs, RTD.
There it is. All right, folks, we are now pivoting in our two-dimensional box here on your screen to none other than talking about Flatline. And I'm bringing it on because I've got to get this over with. I've got to do it.
Yeah. You may have tried procrastinating by talking about Nyssa and Tegan, but here we are. It's that moment. It's time again for the TLDW challenge. Too long didn't watch, too long Doctor Who. Too long did watch, not really too long did watch in the case of Flatline, but yeah, we give 1 minute per New Who episode, 30 seconds per classic episode, but this is a New Who episode, 1 minute to one of us. We alternate every week, and this time, Pete, it is your turn. I feel like you've got it easier than I had it last week with Legend of the Sea Devils.
It's never easy, my friend. It is never easy.
It's never easy.
I'm determined to do right by Flatline, though. I've got to get this. Yeah. Okay, that's so that I'm going to skip over stuff. I'm not going down any rabbit holes. It's going to happen.
Yeah, don't spend 30 seconds on the cold open. That is a classic problem with TLDW. But you've closed all your tabs. We do this. We fly blind. We do not look at any notes whatsoever. It's completely off the cuff. And it's a very enjoyable thing to watch. So we're going to get into it now with the official Pull to Open summary of Flatline in 1 minute. In 3, 2, 1, go.
The Doctor and Clara land in Bristol, but something's wrong with the TARDIS. It's actually smaller on the outside than it usually is. It's only about 5 feet tall. They make their way out. The Doctor goes back in while Clara investigates, but the TARDIS shrinks even more down to sort of a model TARDIS, a toy TARDIS. So Clara has to sort of work on her own, but the Doctor can still give her stuff through the opening. And so she finds out that a lot of people have been disappearing here, and there's a memorial set up. And basically what's happened is that there's these weird two-dimensional creatures that are sort of in the walls of various things that are killing people, and now they have to run from them, and they go to the subway, and the fact that the TARDIS falls on the tracks and nearly gets hit, actually gets hit by a train, so it goes into siege mode, so she can't talk to the Doctor, so Clara has to defeat these flat creatures, which have become 3D, and so she does it by using the art of a guy to fool them into thinking there's a door, recharges the TARDIS, the Doctor names them the Boneless, banishes them to their own dimension, and she's going to be in trouble with Danny because she's still hanging out with the Doctor, and Missy loves that she's manipulated them.
Wow, good job. you got to the end that you even got you squeezed in the tiny Missy denouement. Kind of interesting that you mentioned Graffiti Guy, but it is of course Riggsy, who we should say we have a Riggsy bingo now because we have been to face the Raven, and here he is in his first outing, and he's a compelling character in this, and much more compelling the second time around. Okay, so I should just say that straight up, this is one of my favorite Pull to Open moments, because one of the things that Pull to Open has done for us is made us watch a lot of these stories for a second time. And when you take it out of the context of season 8, Flatline is so good. So different from watching it in context, right? In context, I think, we just had Kill the Moon, and then Mummy on the Orient Express, and then this, and then Forest of the Night, right? We've done Kill the Moon, we've done Forest of the Night,
right?
But yeah, it's like a lot is happening with the Doctor's relationship with Clara, and you're sort of still getting used to Capaldi at the time, and you too may have had this experience of just watching this, and kind of it may have just whizzed over you. Like it's one of those stories that just sort of in the middle, and especially coming after Mummy on the Orient Express, which everyone agreed at the time was kind of a instant classic. You didn't necessarily expect this to be an instant classic, and it hits a lot of sort of a different notes. So I think at the time, sort of my Doctor Who experience was just so crowded, I didn't appreciate this for what it is. And I think, like, we're not going to spoil the actual rating, but this is low key a Doctor Who classic, I think, after having watched it a second time, and it's the first time in Pull to Open history that before we record an episode about a Doctor Who story, I watched the story twice in the last week. I've not done that before.
Maybe you should have done the TLDW, but I think I did okay, by the way.
You did.
I only got the Missy thing went a little over, but that's sort of extraneous, so we got the story. Yeah, I totally get it. I'm sort of thinking back to when I first watched this series. I probably put Flatline and Mummy around the same level. So here's the thing. I think Flatline I gravitate to a little more because it's more scientifically interesting, and that's kind of the thing that I tend to, this is just a taste thing, I tend to prefer. And as I was sort of reflecting on the episode and making some notes, I thought first, this is the kind of episode, or the kind of concept anyway, you think in the classic series that Christopher H. Bidmead would have attacked or wrote, like this idea that it's sort of inspired by more like very well-known, like with Flatline is what I'm thinking about. I forgot who wrote it, but like,
yes,
it's almost the title of the episode, and that's a very well-known work about 2D creatures encountering 3D for the first time, and it's all very weird. What's a square? What's a sphere? And how are they different? Et cetera, et cetera.
Also a low-key classic of science fiction from 1912, I believe.
Yeah, something like that. So I was sort of like more, my sciencey side of my brain was more intrigued by Flatline than Mummy. And watching it again here, I obviously knew what the concept was going to be, but I could really appreciate like the story beats and just how this is structured. Like it's almost like everything is set up and paid off proper. Like this is a really, like coming here right after Legend of the Sea Devils, which was a total mess. Like we said, I mean, here, like, oh wow, this is just really well paced. There's good moments of terror. There's good moments of comedy, and there's such a great climax that the structure. It's like it's I would say it's an exemplary episode of Doctor Who. Like this is how you do it. This is the show.
This is how you do it. And one of the reasons I wanted to watch it again is that I do have a friend, mentioned a couple of times, who I'm trying to introduce to Doctor Who. She's not a science fiction fan at all. And this is like literally the third episode that she's seen, a full episode of the story, and was into it. And it sort of made me realize this is a good jumping on point. If you've got friends who aren't in Doctor Who are perhaps intimidated by the size of the canon. Like, where do you find the entry point? I mean, we know that with Doctor, Pete, that with Mordred Undead, like that was a very random place to enter. At least, I guess it's Tolo's first episode, but it's still pretty random. Whereas this is sort of you see. You really get a sense of what the TARDIS is, like, and how the Doctor behaves, because the TARDIS is different, and because the Doctor is not able to participate in the episode, he has to work through Clara. Clara becomes the Doctor, and then you got all these sort of fascinating ethical implications of that as well. The way that she lies to Danny Pink, and it's interesting they do say rule number 1 in this episode.
Right, I caught that too.
And it's not rule number 1, the Doctor lies, which is interesting. It's maybe another reason I'm now realizing why the randomizer took us here, because in Legend of the Sea Devils, the Doctor says rule number 1, don't wander off, about Dan having wandered off in Legend of the Sea Devils. Here we have a different rule number 1, which is Clara saying that it's use the Doctor's enemies' powers against them. Which is what she does so spectacularly.
3 different rule books you need to figure out this series, because one's the companion rule book, one's the series rule book, one's the being the Doctor, because that's what she says. Rule number 1 of being the Doctor is use your enemy's power against them.
Which is a lie, which is appropriate that the Doctor dubs her the Doctor of Lies in this, because it is all about how effectively she lies to Danny Pink.
Well, I'll say the thing about Clara being the Doctor in this episode is pretty smart, and I would say it's also the thing that takes it away, or gives it takes it away. It gives it a bit of an extra thing to make it not just textbook Doctor Who. Like, it's almost an exemplary episode because it does an interesting twist that takes the Doctor out of it. So structurally, it's not exactly what a textbook episode of Doctor Who would be, but because of that, that's what makes it so good. Because it's like, this is why it makes it sort of interesting for people like you and me to come back to and sort of look at that relationship a little and take it apart a little more.
Take it apart, flatten it out, examine it in 2 dimensions. I have to say that this is also, like, on a second viewing and a third viewing, there are so many good creepy moments that seem so exemplary of Doctor Who. And one that I zeroed in on is where PC Forrest disappears.
Yeah.
And the camera pans at that point. That point is the first time you see the mural on the wall behind her. Before, of course, spoiler alert, you realize that it's not a mural, it's actually PC Forrest's nervous system. But the way they cut it together makes you think that mural's been there on that wall the whole time.
Right.
And it's just brilliant work. Similarly, sort of the big reveal at the end of the episode where, the Boneless are charging the door. They're putting all their power into the door, and we cut to see that it's actually a poster, and it's on the other side of the, they're actually powering up the TARDIS, which I think is a super great way to end this. Like,
it's genius.
And,
that's the thing.
The way that it cuts, the way that you sort of see Clara placing that, and you don't see her putting up the poster, like, it's just really beautifully put together. And the more you watch it, the more you see that, which is kind of a good sign of a classic episode.
Totally. Oh yeah, I love that bit. Where, like, the thing is, like, those murals, both the sort of human skin one, which looks like a bunch of stones, and the other one with the nervous system. I love how it gives you that feeling of bodied horror almost without the gore. It just what you imagine has happened to these people and the pain they must have experienced is way worse than anything you actually see. Just really smart horror going on here. I got to say, this is one of the scariest monsters in Doctor Who early on. So I think when the Boneless are 2-dimensional, like, they're really terrifying because they're in the walls. They're really alien. They sort of slither like snakes a little bit. You know the rules to them just by virtue of what they've been described as these 2D creatures. So they have to be on a surface. So, they set it up with the chair that's hanging by the chain, sort of this hanging chair. and go to the chair, and they're going to the chair, and then it's like, well, then there's still one place they can get you, which obviously is through the chain, and they sort of figure that out. And so there's this really just smartly written action and peril that happens there. Like just a really, really good thrilling thing. I will say they lose something when they gain a dimension. When they become 3D, they become less scary. And there's also the bit where the hand comes out of the ceiling, which is kind of shocking and sudden, but that's where it's sort of
as opposed to the Doctor's hand being the thing from the Addams Family. But
the boneless, the big hand from the ceiling is what I'm talking about. It grabs the dude and pulls them back, and that's a little too much, because then it's like, well, wait a minute. Now they're doing more than just replicating bodies in a 3D way. They're doing some sort of magical thing where they do hands, and they never do something like that later. So once they're 3D, the script itself, I wouldn't say it loses its way. There's just a couple of details they should have thought through a little more. And in that scene, I was thinking, well, why didn't they just have one of the shambling zombie things grab him? I think it's obviously because right after that, the Doctor has his line, "Oh no, they've come to 3D," and then you get the bit where they're rising out of the ground, which is kind of neat. So you can't really show the zombies before that, but it does mean that, well, how they had to figure something out on how they would grab the guy before, and they're coming up with this hand, which is just weak, unfortunately.
It is. It's one of those moments where you're like, oh, this sort of feels like it was inserted for the effect, either in a trailer or, you know what, this would have been a great episode to release in theaters in 3D, the way they did with Day of the Doctor.
Well, it's funny you say that. So I love everything I just said. If you qualify it, it actually gets better in a sense if you think it's a meta comment on 3D. That when stuff goes 3D, it actually becomes a little worse and not as good. And it's just 3D sounds good, but it's actually not as cool as it sounds. the whole effect. So it's like it's a meta comment on 3D cinema, which of course is never really taken off.
Yeah, exactly. And the Doctor has that great line, of course, the next step, 3 dimensions. Which would be so great for a 3D trailer. I'd still love to see this in theaters in 3D. I think it would be so many good moments for that. But yeah, that's sort of like the script here is so tight. The writing is so good that I was only sort of jolted out of it towards the end. And it's around about there. It's actually when he comes out the TARDIS and says, "I name you the Boneless." But that's kind of, I mean, even that is sort of like he says the most Doctorish thing.
Yeah,
like we talked before on the show, and like the Doctor's mission statement, and how there are some really good ones, like in Beast Below, we talked about, so don't interfere unless there's a crying child, and the Doctor's like, yep, pretty much, yeah.
And this time out, it's I'm the man who stops the monsters.
You're forcing me to be what the role that I chose. I'm the Doctor. I'm the man who stops the monsters. And he steps out, and he's shot from below, and it's like hero pose
for sure.
And you get the shiver down your spine of like, yes, this is what the Doctor does. Like literally, again, meta commentary. This is what the Doctor does for us. He starts off as kids when we're kids. So certainly growing up in the UK, that is absolutely what the Doctor is. He is the man who stops the monsters under the bed, the monsters in your brain, and yes, perfect moment, perfect mission statement. And I love the fact that the Doctor is reluctant to do it.
Well, this is the thing.
I love the fact that throughout this, he is trying to communicate with the Boneless before he names them the Boneless.
Even though at some point, even by halfway through, you've already sort of if you haven't already have your sinking feeling that they're evil. It's basically confirmed when they do the numbers thing, when it's like the 55 and the 23 or whatever it is.
They do atomic numbers. So this is kind of you might watch this if you've also watched the movie Arrival. Fine science fiction movie. You might think that Arrival came first. No spoilers, but Arrival is all about trying to find a language in which you communicate with an alien species.
Right.
From a linguist's perspective, how do you talk to someone who just like, we have no commonality? Well, there are certain things. And also this goes back to Contact, right? That great 1997 Carl Sagan movie. Where they're sort of trying to use the language of mathematics, which is basically what the Doctor does here, right? His first attempt to communicate with these species is pi. And he makes a joke out of it because, of course, it's Doctor Who. You make a joke if you talk about pie, and but it makes it very funny. But also, like, that's you're learning something there. This is Rethian Doctor Who. This is educational. But that's a very similar thing of like talk to them in the language of mathematics. They have circles in two-dimensional space, so they would understand pi. And then they get into atomic numbers, and it's fantastic. And it's amazing that this preceded Arrival. You might think it's an homage too, but no. This is 2 years before the movie Arrival came out.
Yeah, I think the atomic numbers thing is a bit of a red herring because it turns out it's like the collar thing. He's just sort of guessing at it. But yeah, it's great that he tries to give them every chance, and it really sets up his triumphant speech at the end. He even references it, of course. Like, I tried to reach out, but now I realize you just don't care. Comes out. I got to say, every time that final bit, it's goosebumps.
Yes.
Like, it's really good because, again, not just because it's a great speech, because they set it up throughout. And he's, you're starved of Doctor action, right? Like, the thing is, he's in it. This is the cool thing. Like, just to step out of the show a little bit, there was sort of scheduling issues or something with the Capaldi. I forget exactly why he couldn't this was effectively kind of like the Dr. Light episode.
Like a Dr. Light, like a Blink,
And they shot most of his stuff in the TARDIS, of course, and that was simplified the shooting schedule, but he's in it. He's handing stuff to Clara. There's a lot of good interplay between the two of them. So he's not absent from the episode, but we are a little bit starved for Doctor action by the end. And of course, once the TARDIS is charged, he comes out, he says his whole speech, and it's just so good. And
he feels charged up as well. And what a great acting choice by Capaldi. This is why I think Capaldi may be, like, he's not my favorite Doctor, but I think it's sort of becoming inarguable. He may be one of the best actors to have taken on the role. Because he makes the choice here to, like, be pretty low key throughout the episode as the Doctor. And he's doing that in order so that when he is full on back charged up 100% Capaldi at the end, it does give you goosebumps. When he's practically yelling his lines at the Boneless about how this plane is protected and all of that. And it's the power of that. Absolutely it is added to my list of best Doctor Who moments of all time, seeing that again.
Yeah. And he names them. He names the monster.
I name you the Boneless. That may be the first line in the script where I was like, really? I feel a bit taken out of it.
Well,
like you've just given them that name.
I think they set it up because he has that whole thing with, he wonders what to call them at some point, and then he does the TARDIS. The dumb deflattener thing, like the dumb name for it anyway.
Yeah, we're not calling it the deflattener. And Clara's like, the 2DIS? It's the TARDIS. Yeah. Why do I even bother? Love that.
But I think you're right in that in the hands of a lesser actor and with a worse script, I think that line is like borderline, you'd be rolling your eyes possibly, or like you'd have to, but it's just set up so perfectly, and everything that leads up to it is so electric. And it's kind of, what I see it as, it's a triumphant moment because these creatures are now completely in his power, and they don't even get the name themselves. He names them. It's another emphasis of his power over them, which is great. And even at the end there, he's sort of not quite giving them a chance, but he says, "I'm sending you back to your own dimension, and who knows, you might even survive the journey." Like, he knows it's probably going to destroy them, but he's also not sort of he's arguably not deliberately just killing them, right? He's just like, go back to where you came from, and uses his sonic screwdriver, his actual power, and then his sort of rhetorical power. Like, I name you the Boneless, and then boom. And then not only does it, I think it's a great moment. We know exactly where this is going to go in the Doctor Who monster book. Okay, no, there's going to be no argument at all about what to call this monster. They are the Boneless.
Got to say, though, coming here straight from the Sea Devils, where we were, rubbing up against the issue of, like, is Sea Devil a slur? Because they call us land parasites, and there's that whole question of, like, is that, well, Boneless, that's an interesting choice of word to use. Like, how do we know they don't have a skeletal structure in their two-dimensional realm?
It's kind of a pejorative. Weird. It's very, like, it's almost like the spineless, right?
Yes, the spineless. It is what it feels like. But, we could, that may be the only dud note that sounds in an otherwise fantastic orchestra.
Yeah.
And
Well, the
my goodness,
Doctor-
I've got to say,
Yeah.
one of the things when I was first, I think when I was first watching this, like you're focused on Clara, right? I think the whole season you're focused on Clara because there's something up, and like you don't know what it is. And
Right.
people were kind of down on Jenna Coleman at the time, and there was every debate. The oxygen was sucked out of every debate about Doctor Who at that time because it was just like, is Clara good or bad? Like, do you like Clara or not? Now her adventures are like we don't talk about that anymore, and you can kind of just see this for what it is. But also, I think that the sort of the comedy stuff didn't quite land at the time.
I think you're right.
The TARDIS being tiny and the Doctor's hand coming out, and it dances on the edge of just being a little too ridiculous, right? I mean, I think overall it works. But.
Again, like I have to keep going back to this. Like it's just the progression, the pacing of it is done so well. Like the visual gags in particular, I think it's expertly paced out. So you sort of start with the slightly smaller TARDIS that whets your like gets you going, right? Oh, I get it. They're going to play with size. Okay. And then it's a toy TARDIS. So like, okay, that's an interesting sort of idea. And it's really cool that he opens the door and she sees his face and he's like, here, you're going to need this. And she's got the psychic paper and the screwdriver. It's like, oh, so that establishes he can still move things out of the TARDIS, like hand them to her. So, and that sets up that wonderful visual gag of her standing there and PC Forrest is in the room and she's just slowly pulling out a sledgehammer from like almost like a magician, to out of her purse. And it's just like, I remember I laughed so hard with my kids this time, like, because it's just, you're clearly invited to, because not only is it a funny visual gag, you're kind of in the mind of Forrest. Where it's exactly. How the hell did you just do that? Like,
it's kind of good that this was an episode set in the UK because I feel like if that was set in the US and you just had an American policeman set, he'd shoot you as soon as he saw
oh man,
this deadly tool coming out of your bag and you're just kind of handing it. But then Clara has that great line of, apparently they're in the walls. Love it.
Yeah, okay, like have at it, like that's pretty good. And then of course
mixture of like comedy and the combination of comedy and the fact that she's lying to Danny where she's sort of kind of saying, oh, just doing a thing on my lunch break, there's a guy I'm helping find his auntie. And the Doctor's like, oh, good, not technically lying. Like that, again, one step too far in either direction, that could be, unintentionally funny in a bad way that takes you out of it. But
right. But I think you're right that the gags, because we're removed from the hot takes on the show and Jenna Coleman at the time, everything really lands. Like the humor is really good here, and not just the visual gags, but I love the interplay early on when she talks about, I'm the Doctor, and I think I just chose that title to make myself sound important. It's like, okay, Doctor of Lies, it's very funny.
Yeah, she's showing off to Rigsy, which I think is wonderful. One thing I noticed about Jenna Coleman's decisions here is the fact that she does 3 or 4 times in the episode, she says, And each time it's sort of a slightly different way with a slightly different meaning. The first one is like when the Doctor's like, you should keep Briggsy around for local knowledge. And she just sort of looks at him appreciatively and goes, But then later on, like when they discover, they're trapped, or I think it's when the Boneless like reveal that they can they can take blocks from 2 dimensions to 3, they can restore dimensions now. She just goes, Like, in a negative sense, but invest that line with such wonderful sort of, this is clearly how she's feeling. But then that's also a nice kind of insight into Clara's character and why she works so well as a Doctor, is that she can, in the words of Rudyard Kipling, meet with both triumph and disaster and treat those 2 imposters just the same. She says the same thing in both a positive sense and a negative sense. Okay, well, this is a new development. And I love that choice, and it's just a tiny thing, but I love it.
Yeah, I really like how she, the Doctor instructs her almost like, okay, everyone's running and they're worried. Our leader's going to emerge. Make sure it's you.
Yes.
And so
it's a Doctor Who episode template in that sense. Like the Doctor's been through this story so many times. You're like, no, okay, this is where we need the leader.
And he's kind of revealing a little bit of his secrets there, right? Like this is how I treat situations, and you know, if there's something's going down, I've got to do it this way. And then she, of course, becomes becomes the Doctor, but she's reflecting how he would approach things in that he wants to give these things a chance, and so she's trying to come up with things, even though I think herself and everyone else, their heart's not in it, because I love the bit where the exchange with the Doctor, where she goes, do you really believe that they could be good? And he's like, no, I hope it. You know, like it's just
like, it would make a nice change. I think he said it would make a it would be. Wouldn't it be nice? Wouldn't it be pretty to think so? Basically,
exactly.
But one thing we should definitely talk about before going too much further is we should talk about Rigsy, and we should also talk about Fenton, right? Who is the character of the sort of the old, you know, snarky, nasty, borderline racist. Like you can kind of tell what his real views are on everything and why he really dislikes Rigsy.
And he's so unimaginative. The psychic paper doesn't work on him.
Yes, which is a wonderful reveal. Even if you've never seen the psychic paper before, like you get it in that moment. Like what? Both the Doctor and Clara say what at the same time. Like, oh, the psychic paper hasn't. You have to have real lack of imagination. So yeah, I mean the economy of the script in the way that it treats Rigsy and Fenton and their sort of antipathy from the start. You go straight into it. It is, I mean, you know, Legend of the Sea Devils, after coming from that, you sort of feel like, you know, Chibnall needs to take notes specifically from this episode, right? Because the very first interaction between the two of them is Fenton handing Rigsy a paintbrush and saying, go on, your signature goes first. Now, a lesser writer might make that more of a, like, later in the script, like once you've built up the sense that they sort of don't like each other.
Right, yeah.
Here they have it straight up front. It's like their first interaction, and it so works. Yeah. It just establishes that Fenton's an asshole. He doesn't like art. He's opposed to... You can sort of read into that like he's opposed to multiculturalism. He's opposed to Rigsy. He's opposed to anyone who doesn't live by the rules. He's probably, you know, low-key a white nationalist, right?
Yeah, and he's wholly not interested in learning, compromising, having any part of his worldview changed at all. Like he's just like, this is it. I mean, yeah, like his personality contrasting with Rigsy is a great background to the episode, and it certainly makes you sympathetic for Rigsy. He's just kind of a likable actor, so that helps. But I got to say, the guy who plays Fenton, who is Christopher Fairbank, I mean, he understood the assignment.
Oh my goodness!
Like he's great. He's a grouch. And it turns out like his cynical view of the monsters too turns out to be the correct one.
It's the correct one, yes. They are actually after him, which is Rigsy is like, oh, so everyone's after you. You know, I know your sort. You think everyone's after you, and Fenton's like, well, actually, they are. They do happen to be in this situation, and he's right. So it's like, you know, it's that there's no question about where the episode sympathies lie. They're with Rigsy, but yet Fenton is if you pardon the phrase, a three-dimensional character. Because he is actually right in those moments, and he survives. Yeah, you'd kind of expect the script to kill him off, and then you have the great moment at the end where the Doctor's like, "A lot of people died, and maybe the wrong ones survived." After Fenton says this borderline racist thing of like, it doesn't matter about you're not saving the brush in a forest fire, you're saving the great trees, and the Doctor's able to snap back into him. These are not trees; these are people. You know.
Yeah, it definitely echoes.
He gets to live another day, even though he's an asshole.
Yeah, absolutely. That sort of echoes a moment in Voyage of the Damned too, where there was sort of a similar sentiment. And I do like scripts that sort of make that somewhat bolder choice of just having the people we hate survive. And Rigsy gets a couple of great moments though to step up.
Yes,
and the first one is when he actually takes the train that is stopped in the tunnel and decides to go and essentially sacrifice himself by ramming it into the Boneless. And Clara has one of her better Doctor moments here where she sort of says, hey, what are you doing? Okay, you know what? You're being all noble and all, but my hairband could do this just as well. Yes. And we need you alive, dude. So let's go. And I like that he's a little bit dejected, like, oh, I guess I was already like it was all about, in his mind, more wanting to be a hero, and
He
she
was
sort of
ready
sets him
for a
straight,
noble-
just like the Doctor would.
He's ready for a noble suicide, and it's also it's a great sort of fill in the blanks moment for your own headcanon. Like that's when it becomes clear that maybe Rigsy is a little bit suicidal himself. And we don't really, it's nice because you don't really get that until there's stuff going on with Rigsy until like right at the end he calls his mother.
Right.
And you only hear a little bit of a snatch of their conversation, but he's what he's basically saying is something happened, but listen, it doesn't matter. There's something else that I want to talk to you about. So clearly home life is not great for Rigsy. Like you get that from that snatch of conversation, but it's so subtle. It's so subtle. You think that he's like this sort of swaggering graffiti artist in a way, but no, like he's got trauma. The guy has trauma, and it's just wonderfully hinted at. And I really love that. And I really love that they subvert the expectations of how many times in Doctor Who have we seen, guest cast guy offers to sacrifice himself, and the Doctor's like, oh, okay, yeah, sure. It literally just happened, right? Legend of the Sea Devils.
I was just going to say, Whittaker's, not to her credit, unfortunately, kind of the queen of that, because it also happens in The Timeless Children, where Kosharmus, I think is the character's name, comes in at the end. It's like, I'll sacrifice myself. You go off, Doctor. It's like, all right. Enough. At least, again, in Ark in Space, at least the guy had the decency to deck the Doctor and put him in a safety closet or something.
But it does happen again and again throughout the show. And I just love the way that Clara does it by putting a hairband on and like, oh, well, I guess I'll just always remember the noble hero who died to save my hairband. What a great moment. Like the Doctor could not have done better himself in that situation in terms of saving Rigsy's life. He probably wouldn't. If it had been the Doctor, Rigsy would have died.
Perhaps. I mean, he's kind of mean sometimes in this incarnation. So one thing, like obviously Rigsy is a key part of them saving the day later, and has to use his art, which is it's a great little twist at the end. And as we were talking about earlier, it's a neat little mislead that they don't show you all the things Clara does. So it's really cool that he gets to do that in the same way that Mickey saves the universe with a big yellow truck. He saves it with a quickly painted poster. That said, it's a little. The only thing that really stretched it is again, I wasn't thinking this in the moment, but if you think about it, like, how could he do that so quickly? Because they're sort of coming up on them, and it would, to make a convincing door, you think that would take like an hour or two or something, right?
Yeah, and it's one of those things where you sort of have to accept. but you don't think of it too much at the moment. And actually, I believed it more the second time I rewatched it this week, because remember that moment where he goes past some of his graffiti in the tunnel, and he's trying to impress Clara with it. He's like, "This is one of mine. Do you like it?" And you see her just like she's got other things on her mind, like she's trying to save the world at this moment. So clearly she's not going to take time to look at his damn artwork. But also the dejected look on his face where she doesn't. Like he's really looking for approval. He's looking for someone to tell him that his art is good. And so at the very end, when the Doctor says, "Your last painting saved the world. I can't wait to see what you do with your next one." Oh, I got chills at that line.
Yeah, that's great.
I got goosebumps at that line. My goodness. I mean, for all of the mean things that the Doctor said about Rigsy, local knowledge and fluorescent jellyfish or whatever else, pudding brain.
Pudding brain, yes.
In the end, he's the one who says the one thing that Rigsy really needed to hear. And what a great moment. And what a great moment for art, right? This whole story is low-key about art. And it's set in Bristol, which is where Banksy came from. Like, there's definitely a reason for it to be graffiti. And it's just beautiful. Yeah. We had this whole discussion last week about Doctor Who as wallpaper. This is that plus so much more. But the art in it is beautiful. That lovely moment where the couch kind of it crumples in on itself into 2 dimensions.
Yeah, so there's a lot
of claymation.
A lot of fun little abstract stuff they do with the Boneless early on, and all their 2D stuff on the walls. And then just the tunnel itself with the sort of figures turned, which is so smart the way they do that, because it's like, oh, it's a memorial, but as viewers of Doctor Who, we're already sort of suspecting what it is, and so every time they go back there, you're very like, and it's very like evocative, like the artwork there of things like post 9/11 memorials, and I think sort of in that era, that's sort of where a public art and mourning sort of combined, and now it's just almost taken, I think, it as a given that's sort of a response to the thing. I remember I visited Halifax a number of years ago, about 10 years ago, and after a particularly bad hurricane, or at least the remnants of one went through there, a lot of people sort of shaped broken trees into sculptures of birds and things like that. And there's like this idea of sort of coming in with artwork after trauma and tragedy, and putting that in, like, it's very, very, like, it just felt so real, like it just, the layers of this thing, and as a setup for the monster, just really, really cool, because you're just like, oh no, get out of there. And then that exactly happens, right? Because the guy gets flattened into the wall, and then they have to run. It kind of doesn't make a lot of sense that they go indoors immediately, but because just keep running. But I guess you could headcanon that pretty easily by saying
avoid walls.
Like they couldn't. They probably just couldn't go anywhere else, like without doubling back somewhere close to the tunnel. So. Yeah, it is what it is.
Yeah, but what a great scene, and what a great scene for exploring who Fenton is, right? That's when it becomes clear.
Yeah.
He doesn't just want to, paint over Riggsy's artwork. Like, he will paint over all artwork. And that's when you have the psychic paper moment of, like, you discover he has zero imagination. So what great character building with such economy.
Just to jump tracks a little bit, how did you like the final bit between the Doctor and Clara, where she is basically looking for his approval and saying, like, I did good, just to say it, just admit that I did well, even though, because he's a bit mean. Like, this is the thing, there's a lot of first season Capaldi here. We mentioned the pudding brain, and sort of the general meanness here and there, that I think is still here. And I think that's one of those moments where she's like, oh yeah, you must have been running out of air or whatever, and you didn't know what you were saying. He's like, yep.
Yes.
And he says it in such a way that it's just, that was probably not called for, Doctor.
Yeah, he doesn't want to admit that he thought that she was good. He has some discomfort about that line. But yeah, then he goes on to say, she's like really looking for his approval.
But he does eventually give it, right? Like, I do like that he doesn't just walk away or whatever. He basically says, you were an exceptional doctor.
Yes, good has nothing to do with it.
Right, which was interesting. And I think that's just trying to echo the theme of the season, like, am I a good man? Which was a whole thing throughout. I'm not sure if they were expected to read too much into that, other than that.
Well, I mean, he has several moments where you sort of realize that the Doctor is realizing this is what he sounds like. In fact, he literally says that, is that what I sound like? And then there's a moment where she says that I have to lie to them. I have to give them hope.
Right.
And the Doctor's like, oh yeah, technically hopeful people do run faster.
Yeah.
That's one of those lines that just sort of changes your entire conception of the entire show. It's almost like when Idris says, I always took you where you needed to go.
Right.
Like, you realize that the Doctor has kind of been saying these uplifting, hopeful things all along, just so people will run down corridors faster and not get eaten.
But that's a pretty good goal.
Yeah.
To not have them eaten. So.
But like, you get the sense that he's realizing it in that moment, and he's like, "Oh, I'm not good. This is not good. This whole thing is not good." And now I'm turning Clara into this. Like, this is, no, the universe doesn't need another Doctor. Like, all of these sort of ethically compromised stuff I've got in my own head. It's also an interesting choice. It kind of makes you realize this is an interesting choice for Moffat to have done. like right after the Day of the Doctor, right after the Doctor is like no longer carrying the guilt of having destroyed all of Gallifrey. Which, by the way, is still very interesting when you think about Day of the Doctor, where it's like, for seasons, the whole the Doctor's thing has been like, he's thought about the genocide of Gallifrey and the Daleks, and he's like, yep, sounds like the kind of thing I do, even though he probably has no direct memory of pressing the button on the moment, right? Now we know, but he's just like, he assumes, I must have done that because that's the kind of thing I do. Like, the Doctor is just beset by ethically dubious choices throughout his life, and it's definitely the downside of being the Doctor.
Yeah,
and it's good that they chose to emphasize it here in the first post Day of the Doctor season.
Well, and then Clara gets a taste of it, and then sort of better understands him perhaps a little more,
and that sets her up for like what will happen the next time she meets Rigsy. There's definitely a through line between this and Face the Raven.
Arguably it sets her up for the next season, where I know Jenna Coleman was sort of on the fence about returning, and then she decided to, and then the direction that Moffat took her as sort of being really almost addicted to this lifestyle is this could arguably Flatline's a bit of a turning point where she gets to step up as the main character in this lifestyle, and it's just like, that was awesome. And then she just wants to do it more.
What did you think about bringing Missy in at the end? Because for me, this is sort of the flip side of how they bring Missy in at the end of Knock Knock. Like, you don't know it's Missy. And Brian, if you're out there listening, I hope you and your daughter have watched it by now, so that you know that Missy was in that vault. But like the vault ending of Knock Knock, we felt sort of really made the episode. Really enhanced it. Whereas this, for me, like just seeing Missy at the end looking at Clara on an iPad, which is too obviously an iPad, by the way.
Well, they play with that later. We've done Dark Water, where they talk about they have iPads in the afterlife. But,
oh, yes. But still, like in isolation, I'm not sure that denouement of Missy looking at Clara necessarily adds anything. What do you think?
No, you're not wrong. I mean, here's the thing. It's when that came on, it was so surprising in a sense, because now we all know who Missy is. And I watched this with my whole family. And because some of us, I think my daughter didn't remember the storyline, they were all like, oh, what's she doing there? What's going on again? It was suddenly like we were suddenly reminded of all the ongoing story of Series 8. So I think that doesn't work anymore, because we know who she is. But I think you can backread a little bit into her comment about how she chose really well, which is that she's really admiring Clara now stepping up and being sort of a version of the Doctor. And in the same way we were just a minute ago, nodding with approval, like she's really getting it. And then having that extra layer of like, well, I actually picked her, so that's awesome. I'm super congratulating yourself.
Yeah, it does set us up to sort of connect whoever Missy is, because of course we don't know at that point, with the woman in the shop from the Bells of St. John's. Right.
If we haven't already, we just don't know she's the master at this point.
Yes, exactly. Which so I guess it's a nice distraction. So I guess it works in that sense, but it seems like such a hurried denouement. And also left me with a question of, how is she actually watching Clara on this iPad? Like, where's the camera?
Well, this is okay. So here's a not really a pick of the story, but that's a really good question. But it actually makes me think a little bit about the nanotech the Doctor uses to hijack Clara's optic nerve and sort of have a microphone / speaker in her ear. So that's great. I mean, the main thing, the reason they do that, obviously, is so they can still interact in real time as if the Doctor's in the room. And that's key to a lot of the dialogue between the two. So awesome. I'm glad they did that. But it does bring up the uncomfortable question of, well, why wouldn't you do that in every single adventure you've been in? Like with every companion, like if you have this tech, like what are you doing? So
the Doctor could just stay in the TARDIS the whole time and just kind of give his companions this.
Or
this
get your own iPad, right? Like, or whatever. Like, you just walk it around and like, okay, you go that way, I'll go this way, and we'll stay in touch through this nanotech, and we can see what the other person sees on our mobile devices.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that does sort of that brings up the whole space phone issue, right? If you can talk across time and space on phones, why isn't the Doctor doing it more often? That could change a lot of these episodes if you have that, especially if you have the Doctor and his companions in constant contact.
Yeah,
just open up a call, man.
It doesn't ruin the episode at all, and I'm willing to sort of shrug a little bit and say, well, sometimes you just have to do these things for a particular story, and it does kind of screw up the continuity a little bit. And if it's going to make the show less interesting, which it would, because the Doctor Who structure, it's not the Avengers, okay? Like, not everyone is going to have like earpieces and talking to each other. Like, this is a different kind of show. So I get the reason for it. It's obviously a dangly thing that they can't really explain away that easily.
Yes. Well, we can't explain that away easily, but maybe we can explain some other things. How about that for some linking narration?
Things that we might want to ask some questions about.
Yes.
Perhaps the 4 questions to Doomsday?
Yeah, the 4 questions to Doomsday. Okay.
What's the first question, sir?
First question is, why did the randomizer take us here?
Good question. Okay. So I kind of already said my take on this earlier, but straight up, I think we've gone from one of the most notorious examples of how to do Doctor Who wrong to one of the best examples of how to do Doctor Who right.
Right.
And I think Flatline's great because it shows that you don't need your story to be sort of part of some epic ongoing storyline. You can do something great in kind of a one-off. And I draw a comparison here between Doctor Who and another franchise, which is the X-Files, where to me, in my mind, I was never all that into the ongoing story of the X-Files. I was never a religious watcher of that show, but I loved certain one-off episodes that it made me come back to the show time and again. And one of them is it's called War of the Copperphages, and is written by a writer called Darren Morgan. And it's clearly a one-off episode of the X-Files. It's kind of a Monster of the Week episode, but it's just so cleverly written. It's so paced well, and things are set up and paid off, and there's clever dialogue. And it's really like it's a reminder that a franchise like either Doctor Who or X-Files is built on your one-offs. That's that's what the show is. And at its heart, it's really sort of almost an assembly of these one-offs that you then play with and create ongoing stories out of. But it's an episodic show, and this is a great episode of Doctor Who. And I think I'm just going to leave that thought there because I'm about to fade into my rating, which isn't the first question.
Yes. Why did the randomizer? Yeah, I think you're absolutely right that it took us here because, I mean, it's poor Chris Chibnall. I feel like the randomizer is digging at him by taking us to such stellar writing, and to show that it's never really about the budget. Like the Legend of the Sea Devils, huge budget, giant set. This, like, I don't know what the budget was, like a little bit of CGI, a little bit of, you got to buy a toy TARDIS, I guess.
Well, and I think it shows that the budget wasn't that high because if there's anything that took me out of the show, it was the special effects around the train, which almost looked like they were done in like for a different show.
Yeah.
That almost reminded me of like classic Doctor Who because they just look incongruent with how the rest of the show is shot.
Yeah. But it's I mean the artwork, using artwork effectively, like that's low budget. But it's all about the script, Mr. Chibnall. It is all about the script, and it's all about how do you take these characters and how do you subvert our expectations around them? How do you draw them really quickly and show their opposition to each other? And really this does everything that Legends of the Sea Devils didn't in terms of making these characters clearly drawn, putting them into fighting each other, basically, the whole Riggsy and Fenton thing. And, straight from the start, never confusing us, the audience, of who is who. And, and not allowing the sort of the lazy writing of Jen Han sacrificing himself,
Right.
instead subverting our expectation on side character sacrificing himself. Yeah, and doing it, by the way, with I think we should mention, like, this is really good sort of progressive episode in terms of like it is the young black man who does not sacrifice himself in the end, who wants to,
Right.
but like that is a trope that we need to get past, of the the black character in any narrative is the one who's going to die and be the best friend who dies or whatever. We've seen that too many times. This is a great way to subvert it. So. Love that about this story. Love it, and also, the randomizer and the TARDIS, man.
It loves the TARDIS.
It loves the TARDIS,
yeah.
and it loves minimizing the TARDIS. It clearly loved Planet of Giants, and wow, what a great thing to take us back to. I think at the time I just sort of had memories of the thing, the Addams Family moment where the Doctor sort of uses the TARDIS to claw his way out. I think that didn't land for me the first time, and I think it sort of cemented the idea that this is sort of too comedic. But no, wow. I mean, Jamie Mathieson, got to give him a shout out. We haven't even mentioned his name yet. Right?
Yeah,
he wrote this and Mummy on the Orient Express, like almost back to back. Holy crap! I mean, he must, in terms of hit rate, he's got to be one of the best writers in Doctor Who history.
Also did The Girl Who Died and Oxygen, which we've done for the podcast. And I think we gave a pretty favorable review to Oxygen.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah, hear all of that. I mean, I guess what we're coming to in terms of the answer is like the randomizer likes a roller coaster. Wants to take us down and then straight back up.
That's all right. I wonder if we have a bingo, by the way, on Addams Family references. We'll have to see if any pop up.
By the way, one last word about that. I really appreciated it this time. I think I loved it the first time where he does the hand thing, just because it's one of those sort of moments in a show where you realize, oh, yeah, like, you can just do that, like it just doesn't occur. And it clearly didn't occur to the Doctor, and the Clara has to sort of tell him to do it, but it's like, oh, of course he's made it lighter. Yeah, why couldn't he do that? You're just kind of into it. And I think I liked it even more this time because I really appreciated the way they set it up. I said the whole progression earlier, from the slightly smaller TARDIS to the tiny TARDIS to the visual gags with the sledgehammer. And then this is like the icing on the cake, or arguably like, the main course, whatever. Like it, I could see someone still being taken out of it just because it's a consciously silly, but it does work with all that setup. Because if they did this first, then that would have been, you would have just completely taken out of it. But because of the whole setup, I think it works even more than it did the first time.
Yeah, plus you get, and it doesn't work at the end. Like he thinks he gets off the track. And by the way, I realized that gif of the sort of the Doctor turning away and dancing from having dragged himself off the track, that's actually quite a common gif. You see it on the internet of just sort of a happy dance gif.
Nailed it.
Nailed it. But then he hasn't, right?
Yeah.
Then he has to go into siege mode. And this is the first time that we see what the TARDIS actually looks like.
True.
Right?
It becomes this Gallifreyan cube, almost like the moment. Gallifreyans like their cubes, I guess.
They do. It is very much like the moment. But wow, I mean, we don't know if that's, I mean, who knows what a Type 40 actually looks like at the end of the day. This is what it looks like in siege mode.
Right.
Which I love the idea. It was like booting it up in safe mode equivalent.
Right. Well, like we said, like when I said it works, obviously I was talking about as a scene and as a moment, but like to your point, I really do like the twist that it doesn't work, that it falls back on the track and it has to turn into this thing, which of course escalates everything, because up until this point, Clara has been able to at least talk to the Doctor, and now she's cut off and has to really step up on her own, and of course does. I mean, again, like just the structure. Jamie Mathieson, good work, my man.
Yeah, incredible work. Also, got to give a shout out to Moffat, who's the one who inspired Mathieson to kind of take the idea of Tiny TARDIS and just go completely in that direction. Keep it shrinking, which it didn't in earlier versions of the script. So, Moffat's your man for like, what if we just made this insanely far in that direction.
Yeah.
And it really worked.
Well, something else didn't work, but we're going to ask about what if it did, because the second question, of course, is what if the evil plot had succeeded?
Okay, so obviously the evil plot is that of the Boneless to invade our dimension. And
Invade, infiltrate, or just replace us.
Yes, another nice line. It's nicely ambiguous about what they want to do, but they clearly don't care about us. Their evil intent has been established, which is lovely. So presumably we're looking at a scenario where Riggsy's painting of the door either doesn't fool them, or like it's too slapdash, and they're like, "That's not a door," and then they move in and kill them. And so the Doctor dies, right? Doctor dies inside the TARDIS.
In the TARDIS, yeah. And it doesn't matter if he regenerates because there's still no power.
Yeah.
So that's tragic. Everybody else dies.
Losing oxygen, right? You get the sense that he's losing oxygen at the end,
so again,
just going to asphyxiate.
Yeah. So to the point of what did the Boneless want? Because it's ambiguous, we don't really know what their vision is. I mean, if you could presume they're there to invade, so they essentially take over the Earth. And honestly, if that's their goal, there aren't that many Doctor Who monsters that I would say would probably pretty decisively do it in a short period of time. So I think pretty quickly the Earth becomes flatland.
Yeah.
And there's
people on the internet who said the Earth was flat. It turned out to be right.
Yeah. Do they then proceed to invade the cosmos? And then I feel like the only species like the Daleks or the Time Lords could really do something about them, because they require some kind of dimensional manipulation to really push them away.
I love the idea of 2D Daleks.
Flattened Daleks. Well, we've seen that, right? The posters in their ships where they're just promoting themselves.
Yeah, the cardboard cutout Daleks from Power of the Daleks could finally be used.
That would be an amazing sort of knowing send-up of the show itself, where it's like, I feel like I've seen these before, these flattened Daleks.
Yes, by the way, not to get too far away from the full question, there's just so much to talk about Flatline. Like, I love the fact that they use the effect first used by Hans Holbein in the 1530s, where this is a famous thing in the history of art. Like, he took a picture of a skull within a painting called The Ambassadors, which is just a painting of two ambassadors who were his patrons, right? It's the guy who did all the paintings for Henry VIII. And he stretched out the skull in the painting so that if you look at it from one side, you can see that it's just a skull on a shelf behind them. If you're looking at it straight on, it looks like a kind of a blur across the middle, right?
Oh, yeah, that's like they do that in the cold open.
This became all the rage. There's actually an image of Henry VIII's son in the National Portrait Gallery. It was done like that. You can see it if you go to the National Portrait Gallery in London, where you can only, if you're standing on the stairs, you can only see it from properly from one side. Otherwise, it looks like a smear. So I guess they take it over. But you know what? I don't think the evil plot's going to get very far. Why? Because Missy is watching.
That's right.
Missy would step in if Missy would not let her beloved Doctor die in siege mode in the TARDIS. I think she would instantly whip those Boneless up into the cloud or whatever her evil plot is. I forget from Dark. The Nether Sphere.
No, you're right. So she steps in. So this is what happens. Yeah. And then it's a matter of whether or not the Doctor sees this happen or doesn't have some other explanation in his head for what happened. Because if he sees Missy and that's all, like basically her plot is revealed early before any of the other episodes happen. So I don't know. Maybe Danny doesn't die then.
Maybe. Yeah. Well, Danny not dying brings up the issue brought to us by the third question, which is, where is the Clara Splinter?
Clara Oswald, of course, in the episode, but prior to this episode, she was also splintered in time in The Name of the Doctor. She is somewhere in every single episode of Doctor Who, a splinter version of her anyway. Where is the Clara Splinter in Flatline?
I would love it if the answer to this one is just really mundane, and that she's actually just teaching the class that Clara should have been teaching that day. She's just like stepped in for this one moment. She's like, "Oh, I guess I'm a substitute teacher now." But then that wouldn't work because then Danny would know that she'd been at work. Like she has to be somewhere kind of really far back from the action here.
Well, my take was that when they find that room in the tunnels, it's apparently stocked with, posters and tape and glue and paint and pens and pencils. And I think she's part of the Bristol City Planning Office, and she basically ensures all those rooms are very well supplied at all times. That's kind of where my head went. Yeah,
she is a substitute teacher, this other Clara, but in Bristol, and she's just done a whole class with students where she takes them down into these disused tunnels. She's like, "We're going to do art class today, kids. Let's bring all our supplies in here. Love it." Yeah, or maybe she's sort of like also kind of whispering to Clara, like, "Don't get back in the TARDIS next time. If the TARDIS ever goes tiny, don't get back in."
Right.
To herself in her sleep. Stay out.
If you followed that advice.
Bristol.
Smart girl. Moving on to the final question, the ultimate question, the only question that matters for Flatline. What did we think of this episode? The Pull to Open rating system, of course, has currently 5 ratings. There's the Dalek, which is
6
what
ratings.
we have for a good episode of Doctor Who. The Ogron, which is what we have for a not so good episode of Doctor Who. The Professor Hater, which is a not so good episode, but hey, at least they tried something or we learned something. The Viscount Banger, which we reserve for the best of the best. Or the rarely used Fixed Point in Time, which is a story that is beyond rating. We can't rate it for often reasons of nostalgia, but sometimes for other reasons.
Yes, and the other potential rating, I just want to, put in a shout out for we've got polls up on this. We will do by the time you're listening to this about whether we should make the Lady Cassandra an official rating. The Lady Cassandra being an episode that was not good, like Legends of the Sea Devils, but was pretty, at least. Was pretty wallpaper, Thin plot, doesn't hang together very well, needs a lot of moisturizing, but yeah, it's kind of, pretty flat wallpaper. And you'd think that maybe Flatline might qualify for that, but no, Flatline, like there's no question of this being anything other than a Viscount Banger.
Wow.
That's not a rating I would have given to it when I was watching it in context with season 8. And but yeah, there's no question now, looking back on it. Low-key banger.
I must agree. Yes, I was kind of not sure if I wanted to go all the way for a banger on here. I don't want to cheapen the banger rating. But, I mean, I said the word at the outset, this is exemplary Doctor Who. And how could I not give a Viscount Banger to something that just really gets the show and is so pleasing on so many levels? Not everything has to be an epic for it to be a banger. And like we said earlier, I would really recommend this episode to anyone who is new to the show. It doesn't have to be your first. It could be the first episode you watch of Doctor Who, but certainly if you're just kind of sticking your toe in and not sure if you're into it or not and trying to decide, watch Flatline. I think you'll be convinced to watch more and more of it. And certainly one, if you are a longtime fan and you want to give an interesting episode that isn't maybe one of the predictable ones that people are often recommending people start with, go ahead and tell them to do Flatline.
And you know what? I think also it's going to be, the further we get away from it, the better it's going to look. And I think part of the reason of that is it sort of feels like, it's literally a pre-Brexit episode, right? 2 years before the vote that divided Britain seemingly forever into 2 camps. 2 camps that are very ably represented, I think, by Fenton and Briggsy. So you sort of see that division in British society before it actually happened. It's almost predictive of that kind of breakdown in society that we have. So, yeah, I think we're
I
going to
need
be
your
looking at this
Brexit
in
read
years to
on
come.
every episode. That could be a new segment. What's the Brexit read of this one?
How does this connect to Brexit? Because yes, long-time listeners know that I may have done this before. However, like it's such a seminal moment in British history, and it's such a traumatic event that like I think that looking back to 2 years before it happened and seeing this sort of almost foreshadowing here is very interesting. So yeah, Viscount Banger in all of its ways, amazing what you can pack into a single script. Politics, art, a locked room mystery, learning more about the TARDIS than you ever learned before, all squeezed into a 45-minute script. And, this is how you do it, Chris Chibnall. This is how you do it. Any future showrunner of Doctor Who, watch Flatline and learn. If you want to write any kind of script, watch Flatline and learn.
Absolutely. Layers upon layers upon layers for 2D monsters. That's very apt. Just really quick notes before we leave. I mentioned I watched this with my whole family. Kids really liked it. My wife really liked it. There was an interesting moment early on I just wouldn't mind mentioning because there's the memorial in the sort of subway there. And my daughter, who's 10, asked, "What's that?" Which I really kind of was struck by the question because, it just reminded me of sort of the innocence of that question of like not understanding what spontaneous memorial is. And sort of because I, having lived through 9/11 and living in New York, certainly like the spontaneous memorial thing, it's just almost like shorthand these days, I feel like in fiction. So it was kind of good to feel like, oh yeah, that's, not necessarily just automatic knowledge, which I think sort of, not sure what to take away from that, but it was kind of a nice little moment.
It does read differently as an adult when you see a war like that. Like there's only one thing it could be, because and also it sort of reminds you of like you're driving down a highway and you see a point on the highway where there are little teddy bears and a note and a photo, right? And instantly what's happened, and your heart sinks. So it's a great way of using our shorthand of what we know and see about the world.
So Jack thought it was a solid episode. He rated it a Dalek. One of the things he reacted to, though, and this is just an unfortunate reality of the production, Capaldi's hair is all over the place in this one. Like,
yes.
Yeah. So like when he walks out of the TARDIS at the end, he's got really short hair. I think what they've learned also from season 1 of Capaldi is that he's much better with longer hair. The crazier look, especially when it gets really crazy by the end of Twice Upon a Time. So all that's good. And I'll just finally end it on that climactic scene is so good. I mean, it really hits home the banger status of this episode. And I could watch that scene all day long, and I have. The clip is on YouTube, and I've watched it over and over again. I am the Doctor, I name you the Boneless, etc. Like, just amazing. Just one of the all-time great scenes in Doctor Who. They really pull it off.
Agreed. And for those of you who are more classic Who fans, like I think this is a good one to watch to remind yourself that New Who can take you to new places, even as a classic series fan.
Alrighty. Well, we're going to be taking ourselves to new places in just a moment because we have to find out where we're going next. And to do that, we need to activate the randomizer.
The randomizer, if you've been living in 2 dimensions for the last 89 episodes of Pull to Open, consists of 2 components. It's how we decide where we're going next. First component, Pete is at the controls of. That's the codex. That's the list of all of Doctor Who stories in weirdly sequential order. Bizarre. We all sort of feel like a 2-dimensional person coming into 3 dimensions looking at that. Like, what the hell is that? I want to understand it. So I go to random.org, which is the executor, which is the other part of the randomizer. And what happens there is they, at random.org, use true randomness. They're listening to atmospheric noise and not algorithmic randomness. Computers are pseudo-random. It's a terrible problem in computing they've never quite solved. But random.org doesn't do that, and it's bespoke randomness. And what Peter's going to do is going to tell me how many stories we've got left in Pull to Open's future, and I will plug that into random.org, and we will give the randomizer some challenges, and I will hit the generate button. Pete, what are we up to?
Looking forward into the future, we have 211 episodes remaining.
211. We are out of the New York area code zone. The randomizer did not listen to Pete's request last week that we get for the 212 episode that we get a 212 based story. However, so would you like to give it a fresh challenge?
Why not? I don't want to take anything away from C. Harvey's challenge of the bus episode. So, randomizer, if you're listening, go ahead and take us to Planet of the Dead, or even something that's sort of quasi-bus. I remember in what was that McCoy episode? Delta and the Bannerman. There's some kind of sort of cheap tour thing they're on at the beginning there too. That's arguably a bus. So there's a lot of semi-bus episodes. But I would say, like, what intrigued me most about Flatline when I first saw it, and this time it still really works, is that sort of taking apart a really interesting scientific concept and turn it into something something scary or thrilling or just fun. Show me something that does that, whether that's Christopher H. Bidmead or something else, but like, let's have some fun. Let's have some fun with science.
Let's have some block transfer computation in here. Yeah, but by the way, we kind of have to give this a banger, given that we gave Logopolis a banger.
Right.
So yeah, and this is clearly, I think, a little bit above Logopolis in the banger rankings. But yeah, I'm actually going to say, give us another bottle episode. Maybe not a bus episode, but a bottle episode, which is kind of, it's a little bit difficult to define. You sort of know it when you see it, but small scale. The classic one for Classic Who, of course, was is it Edge of Destruction, the early one, or Inside the Spaceship.
Very much, yeah. Arguably the very first bottle episode of Doctor Who.
Very first bottle episode, which I've never seen, by the way. And Randomizer, I know that you love Hartnell, so maybe you should give us that. But whatever. There are many other examples in Whovian history of bottle episodes. So just bring us to one of those.
So we got bottles, buses, or science. What's it going to be, Randomizer? She'll give you a countdown.
Yes.
All right, let's find out in 4, 3, 2, 1.
Run for your life!
84.
Oh, old Who, I think.
That's gotta be early.
Randomizer number 84 is Arc of Infinity.
Oh.
Whoa.
Okay.
It's the only thing the randomizer focused on, it seems like, was Mike raving about the Tegan stuff.
Yes. It wanted to give you a Davison episode, but it's also giving us a Colin Baker story.
Oh, and something from series 20, season 20, not series 20, season 20.
There we go. Yeah. There we have it. And more Time Lords. We know the randomizer loves Gallifrey. We're almost at Gallifrey bingo.
Yeah, there's TARDIS stuff in this one too. Not as fun as the dimensional stuff, but there's a lot going on here. Oh man, I don't want to say any more, lest I spoil anything.
I have not seen this one in years. I'm very excited to get back to it.
Me too. And guys, we are excited to bring you to Arc of Infinity soon, but not today, because it's time for us to bid goodbye. Thank you so much for listening. Hey guys, it's Pull to Open. It's a podcast. Please subscribe if you have not already, or follow, as I believe the term is in the Apple Podcast app. It's that little plus sign. When you get to our show page, just hit that.
Yes. Plus me.
Follow us all on the socials. Pull to Open 63 on all kinds of networks. It's Twitter, it's Instagram, it's Facebook, it's
Threads.
Threads, you betcha. And it's Pull to Open. Well, that's it. It's just Pull to Open on TikTok and YouTube.com/Pull to Open. Check us all out there. By the way, if you do follow the podcast on an app, please also follow us on YouTube. That'll really help the show. And we will see you next time for when we find out what is going on in the Arc of Infinity.
Back to the Davison era. I'm very excited, and we'll see you then for it.